Good afternoon. My name is Dan Watt, and I'm here with Pablo Villavicencio, and we're getting ready to kick off another edition of the Better Leaders, Better Schools Ruckus Cast. So, welcome, listeners. And Pablo, I thought maybe we could start today by you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Uh, Thanks, Dan, for having me on the podcast, and to all your listeners. Appreciate the space just to be here and share my story, my perspective. So I'm from Los Angeles. My parents are immigrants from Ecuador, and we came as very typical immigrant story. Came with the hopes of a better education, more opportunity for me and my brother. And we landed in Los Angeles in the northeast corner called El Sereno and really had sort of a subpar educational experience in our local public school that really didn't reflect a deep belief that all kids can learn. I think that really shaped a lot of my life later on. And my parents made the tough decision to falsify my address to go to a really great suburban school about 30 miles outside of where we lived. And that experience and sort of the education I received afforded me the opportunity to go to UC Berkeley and then enter teaching through Teach for America. And I've now been in education for nearly 25 years.
And in our intro call, you talked a little bit about your first teaching experience in Harlem. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my first placement of a school was in Harlem in a school that was really viewed as a dumping ground. And I don't use that word lightly for kids who had not been successful in a very large district, the New York City Department of Education. And this is in the early 2000s. And so I had a class of about 39 sixth graders, and a third of them were over the age of 14. And I'd say the vast majority were not coming reading at a grade level. And so this was often viewed as the last ditch effort for kids, not a place that had a deep sense of belief of kids either. And spent a lot of time trying to do my best. I was a brand new teacher, teaching is such a hard craft. But I think what I learned was really the need to love kids and to create safe spaces for them that allowed me to make some, real gains with our kids that year. But more than anything, really taught me that that school wasn't a good place for kids. And so there was a group of us that had come in from Teach for America and a few long-term district teachers who began to organize and advocate for better conditions for our kids. And ultimately what that led towards was that school being closed down that following year as a
Hmm.
result of, I think, not just the advocacy that we had done, but a part of a larger reform change that was happening to make a difference in New York City schools with better outcomes and smaller schools as part of the small school movement, but taught me a lot as a first year teacher in those conditions and advocating for what eventually became the school closure.
What happened to those kids?
They were, as in most school closures, they were transitioned into schools that had better outcomes. And so they
Mhm,
would all stay together. And of course, it was a middle school between the ages of sixth grade to eighth grade with
mhm,
the existing kids were sent to a variety of different schools. I know there was also an effort to put them into schools that had new growing charter schools and other schools in the area that I think were trying to drive towards better results for kids, a better educational quality for kids. I didn't keep track with those kids. So my hope is that they landed in schools that were able to sustain them beyond the initial placement that they had. But this
mhm,
was an uphill battle in conditions that were really difficult. So I think about
mhm.
those kids often.